Somewhere in the jungles of South Vietnam, the word went out among NVA and Viet Cong forces. When the small helicopter appears, the one that flies at treetop height, the one that sounds like a turbine screaming through the canopy, do not fire. Let it pass. Because the moment you pull the trigger, your muzzle flash marks your position. A colored smoke grenade hits the ground. And the Cobra circling above, the one you can barely see at 1,500 feet, rolls in with 76 rockets and miniguns. The fire discipline became so complete that American scout crews resorted to wearing gas masks and throwing CS tear gas grenades just to provoke a reaction. They needed chemical weapons to start a fight. The most vulnerable helicopter in Vietnam had become the one nobody dared shoot at. Vietnam's jungle canopy was an intelligence black hole. From altitude, triple canopy forests swallowed entire battalions. NVA regiments moved beneath it, dug into it, vanished inside it. Fixed-wing reconnaissance photographed treetops. High-altitude helicopter passes saw green. The enemy moved at night, maintained radio silence by day, and had perfected concealment to the point where a company of North Vietnamese regulars could be 60 m from an American patrol and remain invisible. The Army Scout helicopters were supposed to solve this. They couldn't. The Bell H-13 Sioux and Hiller OH-23 Raven were piston engine relics from Korea. Too slow, too fragile, and critically underpowered for Vietnam's heat and humidity. In the tropical density of the Central Highlands, they couldn't hold a hover. One rifle round through the engine block, and they were done. Lieutenant Colonel John B. Stockton, commanding the 1st Squadron, 9th Cavalry Regiment, the headhunters of the 1st Cavalry Division, Air Mobile, understood the problem before anyone had a solution. His units were building air cavalry doctrine from scratch, and the core idea was sound. Fly low, find the enemy, kill the enemy. Before the right aircraft existed, Stockton's crews improvised with pairs of UH-1B Hueys, a heavy scout down low, a heavy weapons ship circling high. The concept worked. Scouts found what nothing else could. But the Huey was too large, too visible, and far too valuable to use as deliberate bait. Every time a heavy scout drew fire, the Army was risking a $4 million airframe and a 4-man crew to do a job that demanded something smaller, faster, and expendable enough to throw at the jungle floor like a probe. The idea needed a new machine. 12 manufacturers answered the call, and a billionaire named Howard Hughes decided to win the contract, even if it cost him $100 million. In 1960, the Army issued Technical Specification 153, the light observation helicopter competition, to replace every aging piston Scout in the inventory. 12 companies responded. 3 finalists each built 5 prototypes. Hughes Tool Company Aircraft Division, Bell, and Fairchild Hiller. The Hughes Model 369 made its maiden flight on February 27, 1963. Hughes won in 1965 with a bid that made the Pentagon blink. $19,860 per airframe. Hiller had bid $29,000. Music. Howard Hughes had deliberately underbid below production cost, gambling that civilian sales of the 500 series derivative would recover the loss. They didn't. He reportedly lost over $100 million building 1,420 OH-6A Cayuses for the Army. Production peaked at 100 aircraft per month, and then the Army reopened the competition. Bell underbid Hughes by $2,350 per airframe. The OH-58A Kiowa replaced the Loach on the production line. Every scout crew who'd flown both protested. The Army chose the cheaper helicopter anyway. What Hughes had built, though, was something the scout pilots recognized the moment they climbed in. Empty weight, 1,229 pounds, less than a Volkswagen Beetle. Light enough that rotor wash alone could flatten elephant grass and expose troops hiding beneath it. The egg-shaped fuselage had no hydraulic system and minimal electrics, fewer critical components for a bullet to destroy. That light aluminum skin crumpled on impact like a beer can. But underneath it, a structural truss cage protected the crew while self-sealing fuel bladders reduced the risk of post-crash fire. Crews crashed constantly. They walked away constantly. The common saying among Army aviators, if you have to crash, do it in a Loach. The wraparound plexiglass canopy gave near total visibility and doubled as the gun's sight. The pilot aimed the forward-firing M134 minigun through a grease pencil mark drawn on the windshield. No computerized sight, no heads-up display, wax on glass at treetop height. Robert Mitchell, director of the U.S. Army Aviation Museum, stated it plainly. Flying an OH-6 was the single most dangerous job in Vietnam. The Army mandated 300-hour structural inspections for each Loach. In practice, the inspections were almost never performed. Few Loaches survived long enough to need one. The man who came to define what it meant to fly the machine was born in 1948 in Hot Springs, Arkansas. His childhood neighbor was Bill Clinton. Hugh Mills enlisted in February 1967, completed officer candidate school at Fort Knox, and arrived in Vietnam in January 1969. D Troop, 1st Squadron, 4th Cavalry, 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One. Call sign Dark Horse 16. His scout platoon called themselves the Outcasts. Over 3 combat tours, Mills logged more than 3,300 combat hours, over 2,000 in the OH-6A, over 1,300 in the AH-1G Cobra. He was shot down 16 times. He once came home with blood on his windshield that wasn't his. That story is coming. But first, the lethal partnership that made the Loach worth climbing into. The Army called it the Pink Team. The logic was simple enough to explain in a sentence and devastating enough to reshape the war. 1 OH-6A Loach flew low, 5 to 50 feet off the ground, 40 to 60 knots, as scout, music, and bait. 1 AH-1G Cobra circled at 1,500 feet as the killer. The name came from the Army's color code. Scouts were white teams, attack helicopters were red teams. White mixed with red makes pink. The Loach pilot sat on the right, sighting his minigun through that grease pencil mark. His observer, the crew chief, sat just behind with an M60 machine gun suspended from a bungee cord, plus smoke grenades, fragmentation grenades, and sometimes white phosphorus. Scout crews were expert trackers. Mills described following individual footprints through mud, spotting cigarette, but still burning, reading trampled grass, which stands upright again after roughly 8 hours, telling the pilot exactly how recently the enemy had passed through. The Cobra never took its eyes off the Loach. When the scout drew fire, the observer dropped colored smoke on the enemy position. The Cobra rolled in within seconds, 76 2.75 in rockets, miniguns, 40mm grenades. If the situation warranted, for UH-1 Huey Slicks carrying the blue team, Aero Rifle Platoon Infantry, sat on standby to insert ground troops. A command and control Huey orbited above everything, running the show. Summer 1969. Mills and crew chief Jim Parker flying toward Dao Tiang with a Cobra stacked above them. They pitched over a ridgeline at 50 feet and surprised an NVA heavy weapons platoon in the open, soldiers scrambling, weapons everywhere. Mills squeezed the minigun. Parker opened up with his M60. In the chaos, Mills spotted 2 NVA soldiers sprinting down a paddy dike. One had a large cooking pot flapping against his back. Mills pivoted the Loach, lined up the grease pencil crosshair wobbling on the plexiglass, and fired. Both men dropped. Then both Americans ran dry. Parker grabbed his M16 and a 12-gauge shotgun. Mills steadied the collective with his knee and emptied 6 rounds left-handed from his personal .357 Magnum revolver. When they were completely out of ammunition, minigun, M60, M11, shotgun, revolver, the Cobra above pulverized the position, music, with flechette rockets. Post-action count, 25 hits on the Loach. Airspeed indicator destroyed, altimeter gone. 5 rounds through the canopy, 3 through the rotor blades. Armor plate under Parker's seat had caught rounds that would have killed him. Infantry inserted afterward found 26 NVA dead, music, 2 prisoners, AK-47 rifles, a heavy machine gun, a 60mm mortar, and music, Russian pistols. The troops presented Mills with the cooking pot. It had 24 bullet holes in it. This was the Pink Team distilled to its essence. The Loach finds. The Loach fixes. The Cobra finishes. The pilot who flies at 50 feet is not suicidal. He is the sensor in a killing system where the actual weapon orbits 1,500 feet above him. Experienced Cobra pilots didn't wait for the radio call. As veteran Bruce Powell noted, good weapons pilots followed the flight patterns of the low bird, and were often rolling in on target before the smoke marker hit the ground. The 1/9th Cavalry alone accounted for an estimated 50% of all enemy killed by the entire 1st Cavalry Division during the war. Air cavalry units reportedly initiated 90% of their own engagements with the NVA and Viet Cong. The Pink Team didn't wait to be ambushed. It went looking for the ambush. On January 25, 1969, at the Battle of Phu Mai, a 90-man American infantry unit had been pinned for 2 hours by a fortified NVA machine gun bunker. 5 Americans dead. Warrant Officer Alan Ace Khazali, D Troop, 3 out of 5 Cavalry, 9th Infantry Division, was overhead in his Cobra and determined that friendly troops were too close for a gunship run. He flew back, music, to base, switched to an OH-6A, returned, and attacked the bunker head-on with minigun fire. Then he landed directly on top of it. His gunner jumped out, dropped a fragmentation grenade into the bunker opening. Khazali pulled pitch and lifted off seconds before the blast destroyed the position. He flew back to base, switched to his Cobra again, and rejoined the fight. Almost certainly the only time in the Vietnam War that a helicopter landed on an enemy bunker. The man flew combat wearing an 1860s cavalry uniform, white Stetson, cavalry saber. UPI called his exploits far surpassing those of the Lone Ranger. 49 decorations. Music, he died in 1993, aged 46, after a failed heart transplant. Then there was Queer John, an OH-6A and Alpha troop, 1 in 9 cavalry that crashed 7 times in combat and was repaired every time. 61 patches from bullet holes and shrapnel hits. Never lost a single crew member across all 7 crashes. Gunner Sergeant James Thompson, he's been through a lot of wear and tear, but I think he's got a lot more hours to go. The physical embodiment of what Hughes had built, an aircraft designed to be destroyed and bring its crew home anyway. Mills himself put the reality of scout flying into words that no narrator can improve. Most of our engagements, we were 25 to 50 feet away when we opened up. I've seen them whites of the eyes, and they've seen me whites of the eyes. I have come home with blood on my windshield. Close enough to see the enemy's face. Close enough for his blood to reach the aircraft. The NVA and Viet Cong were not static opponents. Their battle doctrine stressed continuous tactical learning, formal criticism and self-criticism sessions after every engagement, lessons disseminated through conferences, field manuals, and memoranda. They studied the Pink Team and grasped its calculus with lethal clarity. Shoot at the Loach, and your muzzle flash reveals your position. The smoke marker drops. The Cobra rolls in. You die. Don't shoot, and the Loach might pass overhead without spotting you. The math was unanswerable. The word went out among enemy forces. Fire discipline became the primary defense against the hunter-killer team. The most vivid confirmation comes from Bruce Powell, D Troop, 3/4 Cavalry. During pacification operations, Powell described crews who couldn't provoke a reaction. The enemy simply would not fire. His teams resorted to wearing gas masks, music, and throwing CS tear gas grenades to flush the Viet Cong out of hiding and force them to engage. The enemy's refusal to shoot had become so total that American scout crews needed chemical weapons to start a fight. No specific captured NVA document ordering troops to hold fire on the Loach has surfaced in open-source research. The behavioral reality, however, is confirmed across veteran accounts and military historians alike. Enemy troops learned through brutal experience that firing at the small helicopter was suicide. Then the system broke. In 1972, during the Easter Offensive, the NVA deployed hundreds of Soviet-supplied SA-7 Grail shoulder-launched heat-seeking missiles. These could destroy a Loach before the crew even knew they were under fire. The Cobras circling at altitude were even more vulnerable, bigger heat signatures, more visible, with only seconds of warning from a missile's exhaust plume. From that point forward, both hunter and killer were forced into nap-of-the-earth flight. The elegant geometry of the Pink Team, the Loach as bait below, the Cobra as executioner above, became obsolete overnight. The human cost had always been staggering. Nearly 68% of all Loaches sent to Vietnam were destroyed. Scout pilot shelf life, roughly 6 months, killed, shot down too many times, or scared into quitting. New Loach pilots received approximately 10 hours at the controls before their first combat mission. Observers got less. Bob Moses, a 19-year-old draftee, received 1 day of training before flying into the jungle. Clyde Romero, scout pilot with C Troop, 217 Cavalry, 101st Airborne Division, from the Bronx, the only minority pilot in his unit, framed it without sentiment. The shelf life of a scout pilot was probably 6 months. You were killed, shot down, or got scared and quit. After the catastrophic failure of Operation Eagle Claw, the 1980 Iran hostage rescue, the Army needed a special operations helicopter that was small, agile, and combat-proven. They chose the OH-6A. The 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers, flew MH-6 and AH-6 Little Birds derived directly from the Loach. Grenada, Panama, the Persian Gulf, and most famously Mogadishu, 1993, Operation Gothic Serpent, the Black Hawk Down mission, where MH-6 Little Birds conducted rooftop insertions of Delta Force operators in the tightest urban terrain on Earth. The 160th had explicitly rejected the OH-58 Kiowa in favor of the OH-6 derivative. Scout crews had been right all along. The hunter-killer pairing the Loach perfected, a vulnerable sensor drawing fire while a lethal overwatch waited to destroy the shooter, is the template for every modern scout attack team. OH-58D Kiowa warriors guiding AH-64 Apaches, AH-64ES controlling Gray Eagle drones. The pink team was the first successful proof of what the military now calls man-unmanned teaming. The human scouts of Vietnam were performing the same mission that drones perform today, at treetop height, with grease pencil sights and bungee cord machine guns. Hugh Mills Miss Claude 4 hangs from the ceiling of the Army Aviation Museum at Fort Novosel, Alabama, the highest honor for a rotary wing aviator. The grease pencil marks are long gone from the plexiglass. Mills put it simply, if I had to look back on my career at the thing I am most pleased with, it's not the Hall of Fame, and it's not the awards. It's the command of the outcasts in combat, twice, a 1,200 pounds helicopter with a wax gun sight, the most dangerous job in Vietnam, and the men who kept climbing back in.